We are privileged tonight to have Kathleen Donnelly. She's a canine handler for Sherlock Hounds Detection Canines and enjoys using her experience to craft realism into her mysteries. She has been a handler since 2005 and has over 300 hours of narcotics certification with her dogs. On the writing side, Kathleen was a Killer Nashville Claymore Top 20 finalist and placed second in the Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers Colorado Gold Contest. Kathleen's debut canine mystery, Chasing Justice, will be released May 24th, 2022. Right. Congratulations. She lives in Berkeley, Colorado, with her husband and her four-legged co-workers. Boomer joined the Sherlock Hounds team in 2019. A rescue from Oklahoma, he loves keeping schools safe by sniffing out drugs, alcohol, and gunpowder. Boomer's other passions include sitting by Kathleen's desk, taking long walks, and eating things he shouldn't. He lives in Bertha, Colorado with his fellow drug dogs, Willow, Gracie, and retiree Spark. And welcome. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all for having us come tonight. We've been looking forward to this. So after giving several different presentations, one thing I really realized is every canine agency does things a little bit differently. So for anyone researching canines for their book, where I've kind of taken this presentation is giving you the basics so that you could go to an agency that you want to use in your book and ask some questions and learn how that specific agency does stuff. So for us, for my agency, I'm with a company called Sherlock Hounds Detection Canines. As a mystery writer, I wish I could take credit for naming the company, but I can't. That goes to my business partner. Boomer is one of our 4 canines. We have all labs because we go into schools and we check for drugs, alcohol, and gunpowder. And I have some things hidden, and he's already figured out where I have one thing hidden. So he's excited. So we're going to try to give you a demo tonight and answer all your questions, talk about how the dogs are trained. I mean, definitely feel free just to ask questions, and same for the Zoom audience. I think Margaret or DJ can keep an eye on the Zoom audience. So if people have questions, we can work on that. So my background, I've been working for Sherlock Hounds since 2005. And, I don't know where
Somebody needs to go.
Okay, I'll get on. Oh, there we go. So is there somebody out there in might do is go ahead and throw that toy. Sorry, Lori. You can just throw it back up there. There you go. And we want him to retrieve it. He has that energy. He likes to squeak. He likes to play with it. Let's go tug. So, good job, good boy. So that's the kind of drive we look for in these dogs. And the reason why we look for that, and it can actually be hard to find that amount of retrieve drive and this kind of energy, but the reason we look for that is because we use it to train them. So they just think we've gone out, hidden their toys all over the world or in a school or wherever, and that it's their job to find the toy. So when they find something, an odor they're trained to find, then they get their toy. So with that, what I might do is do a demo and then see what kind of questions everyone has, or we can, there's plenty of things to talk about. So he already knows that we're gonna do this. I'm messing around with him. We're working on his alert. So I want him to get a little bit better alert. He's still, in some ways, he's still a young dog. We got him, and we got him in September of 2019, and then, of course, we all know 2020, enough said. So he didn't get as much work. He got a lot of at-home training, but there's only so many places at home you can hide drugs eventually. So we're just still working on a really solid alert. What I want him to do is when he finds it, he does a passive alert. That means he's going to sit, and I have one hide down here with the articles, and I have one hide over here in the cabinets, because I was hoping that would help everyone see. But what we want him to do is when he finds that odor, is he's going to sit, and then I want him to stare at where the odor is coming from. And that's what we're having to work on a little bit, because he wants to sit and then turn around and look at me and say, just give me my toy. So we're going to work on that a little bit tonight. What I've done, I have two different collars on him. I have, I don't know if you can see it on Zoom, but it's a real light pinch collar, and that's you're off duty, you have to behave, and I think everyone who's here tonight, I feel really good. I got a lot of great compliments on how well he behaved, and he knew he was really good. Like, he laid down during the during the introductions, he was really good, but now he's on his working collar. And I squeaked the toy earlier, so now he's ready. So what I want everyone to notice, and I don't know if I threw these out in good order, but we'll play with it. When he gets in what we call in odor, so what that means is that one of these items down here has hide in it. That hide is throwing out an odor, and it throws out what we call a scent cone. So that odor comes out, and it kind of just goes out in a cone shape. And so when he gets in the odor, his body language is going to change. And then, I don't know with the way I have this set up, he might work more of a scent cone with the other hide, but what he might do is go past it and then come back and just go back and forth until he pinpoints it down. Now, I will say sometimes he gets excited, don't you? And then he doesn't want to pinpoint it, so that's something else we're working on. So what we're going to do here, okay, see? When I'm going to give him the command, it's just find it. He already knew where it was. Over there, he's looking at it. You guys can see that on the. And then we just stay at home and tell him he's such a good boy. Such a good guy. Yeah. Good boy. So I was telling him earlier today, we worked some schools this morning, and my two female labs got to work the schools, and he was pouting so bad because I didn't let him work because I knew he was coming tonight, and I told him he was going to have a lot of fun. So now he believes me. Yeah. When you go to the schools, do you keep him on the leash? Yes. So when we work in schools, I do keep him on leash. Very rarely will I take him off leash. We can. It's not that I couldn't. When he leads you? Yeah, I encourage him to follow him. I follow him, and I think it'll show better on this next. This was tough because he knew. I did a really silly thing in that I put the lunchbox that had the hide in it right in front of us when we were being introduced, and I was trying to scoot it out of the way. He had it figured out. Yes, good boy. Good boy. So on the next demonstration, I think he'll show you better how he takes me. Hopefully, we'll see if I set that one up better. So, yeah. Any other questions before we do the other demos? Anyone? Zoom? Everyone's good. All right. So I tried to set this up. This is a little bit like working lockers here in the cabinets. We're just getting their noses into areas that throw off a lot of scent. So to us, it doesn't seem like it would have a lot, but cracks, you know, anywhere that door opens, that's where we're trying to get their nose. We're trying to get them up and down, because scent molecules, when a scent sets up, it'll trickle down and they can catch it down low. And I like to think of scent a little bit like bookshelves, since we're all writers. You have different scent shelves. Like, scent can do funny things. Airflow in a room can mess with it. If you're outside, wind can certainly mess with it. So you're trying to get that dog kind of up and down and into different areas. If we're working a vehicle, we just did a certification and we did really well until, well, they did really well. The handlers didn't do as well. The handlers didn't do as well because when we were working that vehicle, we didn't get their nose down under the vehicle enough. So for our certification, we have one miss which luckily we're allowed one. So we're allowed that one miss, and but as soon as we got their noses down low into that low air shelf, the dogs had it like that. So it's really important as a handler that we try to work different areas like that. So I'm gonna set it up. I don't normally put the toy under my armpit. This is just a training thing. I don't want to go backwards from what we've been working on. So when and there's hand sanitizer there. He might alert on that. We'll see if I can get him past that. Hand sanitizer is like 70% alcohol. They're trained by alcohol, so if he does, he'll get this toy. But what I'm gonna do is pass him out, get him in different scent areas. And you'll notice when he gets into odor, and this is what he tends to do. He has the odor, and then he second guesses himself. So I'm just gonna let him come back and work it. So he is working the scent cone here. Okay, good. And now he's sitting here. Once his odor is done, I actually hit it over here, but this odor is just spread out. But he's in the right area. So I'm gonna open it up, and I'm gonna make him get in there and find it. I screwed that up. Okay, I'll find it. So I'm gonna let him figure it out. I try to keep my feet moving, so he wants to look at me to see when he should indicate. And that's a handler screw up. So I want him to look here, and then I'm gonna throw it in. It's really hard. Hold on. I'll leave this open so we remember to take that. So I don't lose some training aids for them here. Good job. Good boy. Good boy. And we play tug. Okay, good job, bud. Good boy. You're so good. And then you gotta tell them how good they are. So that was a nice example of a scent cone. He worked back and forth there. You can see he actually had it, and then this is Boomer for you. He second guessed himself. So he had to go over here, and then he realized he was out of odor over there. Then he had to come back here, and then he realized he was out of odor there, and then he finally went in and found it. And he's funny. He has so much drive, and he gets so excited about his toy that he tends to do something that we call fringing. So this would be good if you're writing about a canine. Fringing is where they get in that scent cone, they get in odor, and then they just sit. And that's not what we want, right? We don't want to have to go, if these were lockers, we don't want to have to search 10 lockers. So we're always working with them to make sure he really pinpoints it down, which he did. He did a very good job.
Yeah, Kathleen, when you go in with him or any of the dogs, how do you get contacted? Is a principal able to contact you if they have suspicion, or the police, or how does that normally work for you?
That's a great question. I'm going to put him back on his non-working leash just so he knows. So we are really lucky. We are grant funded. Yeah. And so any school who wants us can have us pretty much. And we work the northern Colorado area. See, today I work Federal Heights, Thornton area. We work as far north as Alt, as far west as Estes Park, go out to Keensburg and Kersey. I have a lot of miles on my car. So usually what we do is we contract with the schools. So I'm not a law enforcement officer. I'm going in under the school search and seizure laws, which is reasonable suspicion, which is very different for a canine officer, very different search and seizure laws. Search and seizure for a canine officer, you need probable cause. It's like a whole different ball game there. But we work under reasonable suspicion. We work at the direction of the school. I never go at the direction of a school resource officer, because that would make me then an agent of the police, and then that changes my parameters. So yeah, so we go in and we choose random areas. We never target anyone. So like if you guys were a class, we would come in and say, everyone leave your stuff and walk out. And if the principal thought that Mike here, because he's a suspicious character, so maybe Mike has something, it's important that the principal doesn't tell me that. So then I would just randomly check everything, and if the dog alerted on Mike's stuff, then we know. So, I mean, you always hope that's the way it works out. So, and you know what? Sometimes the dogs go in and we search a room, and we get done checking, and they have not alerted on who they thought they would. And I always tell them, like, you trust your dog. That's why we work on that's why I was saying I try to keep my feet moving. I'm not trying to tell him where to indicate. I want to trust my dog. I want to know that he's going to go out there and find it on his own. Yeah. Great question. Yeah.
So that's a toy. How long does it last? And do you have like a stack of them? Does he never get to play with it except when he's doing this work?
Yeah, so anytime he plays, there's going to be some odor involved. Now, it can be fun. Yeah, it can be a lot of fun, huh? Like, I have a Kong Wubba at home that I've scented up with some vodka. So for a fun day, I'll just go hide it out in the yard. I know, so normal, right? That's what everyone has at home for their dog. So I just go out in the yard and hide it, and he finds it, and we play. And he loves it. I mean, that's the game. So
they play, just run around.
Yeah, I mean, he'll run around. He'll play fetch. He might. I don't know if he'll show you guys. Sometimes he'll throw it at me. You want to throw it? Throw it? You want to throw it? Throw it? You want to throw it? Yeah. Where is it? Yeah, so bring it. So he'll throw it at me, and then he might. Yeah, so I mean, that's just good job. You're so good. That's just, we think he's about 4.5. He was a rescue. Yeah, he came out of a rescue. He was probably, I'm going to guess, he was probably a really cute puppy who got really spoiled. And they didn't teach him any obedience. They just didn't take the time to work with him. He's such a wonderful dog. I mean, when I got him, if you asked him to come, he would run the opposite way. If you asked him to sit, he would like take off. He had no idea. He still has a hard time with down, but we were working on it tonight. He was doing pretty good with it. So he's just a prime example of probably a really cute young puppy someone got and just didn't take the time to train.
Yes, Kathleen, we have a question from Sabrina.
Sure.
She says, she's a cat person, by the way, and doesn't have a lot of understanding of dogs.
Okay.
But she's wondering if you could talk more about why toys are so rewarding for a dog.
Sure, that's a great question. So not every dog finds toys rewarding. Some dogs, when we test them out, we look for a dog, we say high energy, and that we could throw the ball for like 20 minutes, and they would just keep playing with it. And actually, when he gets tired, when we play at home, he keeps the toy and he goes and lays down. He's like, that's what we want. That's not true for every dog. Not every dog is going to have that kind of retrieve drive. So there's a lot of dogs who fail out. We do a lot to test them. So we're looking for one really specific kind of dog. And this is true when I said different agencies, different things, but that is true for all agencies. If you meet, whether they're search and rescue or police dogs, they all have this incredible play drive. In fact, the police dogs that are taught to apprehend people, which is the politically correct way to say they're gonna bite you, when they're taught to apprehend, a lot of it's just play. You put a sleeve on and you start playing with them like that, and so you see them go out and apprehend a suspect, and they've latched on. Next time you see a video of that, look at their tail. Usually it's wagging, and they're like, yeah, this is so much fun. So this is great. And of course, the person on the receiving end is not playing the same way. But it's a very specific, and it can be hard to find. And there's a lot of labs out there that we've actually failed out, even though they're Labrador retrievers. There are also Labrador couch potatoes out there. So some of the other tests besides the toy, we'll do things like, I might ask him to see if he'll get up on the table. Oh, sorry, there's a wine glass there. So, oh, no, you're good. So yeah, we want to see if they're willing to check up, put their paws up on things. If I were to hide the toy, say, around the corner, I want to see, you see how he keeps his interest in it?
Yeah.
He doesn't get distracted. And I'm going to hold him here for a little bit. Now he's going to get mad. Okay, find it. And so we look for that when we're testing them out. Good job. So not every dog has those qualities. Those are just a few of the tests we'll do. We'll do things like, if I was testing them out, maybe next time I'd throw the toy up, like in this podium or somewhere with an obstacle that he had to get through. So hopefully that answers the question that not every dog has these qualities, that we're looking for really specific. So I think we have another question here.
You don't give him a treat when he does something. Like they do dog shit, dog doesn't make him a treat. You just say good dog.
Yeah, I praise them up. Sometimes I'll try to bring my voice up a little bit, like, because that brings it gets them excited. We were training with a canine officer down in Oklahoma, and he's a big guy. Like, he's a big guy. I mean, I'm 5'11". This guy made me look tiny. He's a big guy, has a big old German Shepherd, goes in, the dog finds something, and it's really nice. And I was like, oh my God, Scotty, where did that come from? So we gave him a really hard time about that. But he was just praising the dog up. And when you get real squeaky like that, it's kind of like a squeaky toy. It brings their drive up and lets them know they did a good job. No, the only thing he gets treats for, and this has nothing to do with his work, because he was so bad at a recall at coming, and because when we're out working, if he got away from me, I want him to come. So at home with treats, I worked on, Boomer, come, get a treat. But that was totally separate from his work. So, which he does great now. If I call him, he comes right over. Don't you? You're so good. Yeah. So, other?
Yeah, let's go with somebody else if you want.
No?
Okay. Could you talk a little bit about the training that was involved with Boomer, because he was a rescue, so I assume you or someone else trained him. And then the value of these dogs once they're trained.
Sure. So we have two trainers. One's in Oklahoma, Mackie Kelly with Canis Major. Mackie's a fantastic trainer and has a great sense of humor and puts up with us coming down to Oklahoma, and we call it the Colorado invasion for him. So he does the initial training. He has a license with the Drug Enforcement Agency to have the real drugs to go ahead and train the dogs on. What I have in the Princess lunchbox over there was some pseudo marijuana, and then over here is some pseudo heroin. So pseudo meaning it's not the real thing. Obviously in Colorado we can have the real thing, but I didn't think the organization here would appreciate me bringing the real thing tonight. So Mackie gets them going. He does the initial training. He teaches them the indication of a passive alert. There is another kind of alert called active alert. I have one active alert dog. They will scratch at stuff. We're phasing that out because, yeah, exactly. They're scratching at stuff. We're damaging things, and that's not a good thing. So, and I thought about bringing her tonight because I was like, oh, Gracie could show just a different kind of alert, but she would be knocking over wine glasses. It would be that kind of, so, and just remind me, I'll finish up Margaret's question real quick. So Mackie does the initial training. We use the play training, and when they come out of training, our single-purpose dogs are worth about $10,000. If you have a dual purpose meaning they do more than one thing, so that's like a police dog. So narcotics detection or explosives detection. They won't do both, one or the other. And then tracking and apprehension and some evidence searches, those dogs are worth about $40,000. Okay, Mike, sorry.
How breed specific is it? In other words, could you train a Chihuahua or a Newfoundland?
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of the whole spectrum.
Yeah, so that's a great question. I called him my undercover agent. We had a Russell Terrier who was a fantastic drug dog, Sparky. Anyone who's Facebook friends with me probably gets tired of seeing Sparky pictures, but he was really good. He had the right characteristics. Now, I think the only breeds you really wouldn't want to use are like pugs or any breed with the smush noses. They might have a harder time. But that being said, just because we use different breeds, if you're riding a canine, look into what the agency uses. Because like police departments are going to use a Malinois or a Dutch Shepherd or a German Shepherd, because those are the dogs that can intimidate. I mean, if anyone's been around a German Shepherd or a Malinois, especially the Malinois, they have this like intense, like they'll just look at you. Our trainer had one last time we were down there. Mackie had one. This Malinois didn't like to release the bite. He loved the bite and he didn't want to let go, which is a big training problem, which is why he was still with Mackie. And I'll never forget, Mackie was setting up some narcotics hides for him, and he hands me the leash, and he's like, here, you hold him. And I was holding him going, please don't bite, please don't bite, right? But the feel down the leash with that dog was so intense. I mean, that dog was just, you could feel it, and I was like, here you go, you can have him back. So the breeds, yeah, if you're writing about a canine, certainly different breeds can be used, but just make sure you research the agency. So like in my case, in my book, I use a Malinois because it's a Forest Service canine, and they're used as backup basically for the law enforcement officers who are out patrolling on their own, and that dog becomes their backup officer. So, yeah.
I've also heard that in the case of like some of the Shepherds or Malinois or whatever, they get their breeding and training in like Germany or Holland or something like that, and they're taught to respond to Dutch or German commands.
Yep.
But then I just saw somewhere online about can dogs be bilingual?
We were talking about that earlier.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you get a dog who's trained in, let's say, Dutch, is it just easier to keep using the Dutch for those commands, or do you try to teach them English, make them bilingual?
No, that's a great question, because actually this came up when I was writing my book. I was like, what should I have the handler give commands in? I finally just stuck with English, and I'm sure there's someone out there who's going to say something about that, because a lot of agencies use the Dutch or the German. French is another language. Our trainers feel, I asked them about that, and they feel like if the dog has been imported and they already have commands and they already know it, the handler needs to learn those commands.
Well, German sounds so much meaner.
It does. Now, the flip side of that, if they don't have it, I know Mackie said, because he trains a lot of police dogs, and his feeling is two things. One, he had a canine handler officer the first time he got into a really rough situation where he needed the dog to go apprehend someone. High stress situation, we've had officers talk about what that does to you, the adrenaline. The handler could not remember the command. It couldn't come up. Luckily, the dog was like, I got it.
I'm gonna go bite.
Maggie's other feeling was, if you're a suspect, and I'll just keep picking on you, Mike, you're not complying with me. If I say, go get him, and you hear that in English, you're like, okay, never mind. Whereas if it's in German and someone doesn't know it, they're kind of like, although I think you have the intention when you have the dog, like,
Screaming, mouse, kind of gets the point across too.
Yeah, so, yeah, I mean, that's something you can think about in books. I just decided I didn't want to have to type over and over again the same command and worry about making sure I spelled it right, so that was my final. It's like, okay, my dog's gonna have English. But the funny story, Suzanne and I were talking about, after Mackie told me this, when I got Gracie out of training, he said, her command to drop the toy is los. And I was like, I thought we weren't doing German, Mackie. And he said, well, I wanted to make sure your dog was bilingual. That was it. So, yeah, so she's bilingual. We have one bilingual dog.
Yeah. So Donnell Bell has a question, and Donnell, can you hear me? I'd like you to go ahead and unmute and ask that, please. Thank you. Yep, she can hear me.
Awesome.
Okay, can you unmute?
Okay, is that better? Can you hear me?
Yep. Yeah.
Kathleen, I'm curious about dogs being trained for seizures, and would they be retrieving? Could you talk about that a little bit? I have a friend who has had 3 seizures in the last year, and I'd like to know,
Sure.
do you have to get them as a puppy, and do they have to raise them, or can you just talk about that, please?
Sure. I'll be honest, I don't know a ton about their training. I know they've used them for seizures and diabetic dogs. And if your friend is interested, you know how to get a hold of me, Donnell, and I can connect you. I have another friend whose son is diabetic, and they did train the dog. And what I know from her is they got him as a puppy. It's a lab. And I believe they food rewarded for that. And I believe that's what they do for the seizure dogs as well.
Okay.
But I'm not 100% certain.
Okay.
Because that's kind of a little different. Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Anyway,
Thank
sorry,
you.
I don't know more about that. Yeah, you're welcome. Other questions? Do we have other Zoom?
None in the Zoom queue.
Hey. What else should we tell them, Boomer? I'm trying to think, we covered, oh, yeah, go ahead.
How long can a dog do this? Is it like, by the time they're 8 or 10, their nose isn't working as well, or it's a lot of investment? How long is the career?
Yeah, it is a huge investment. So we want them to be about 1 or 2 years old when we get them, because they can retire anywhere, barring that they don't have any injuries. They can retire anywhere from like 7 to 10 years old. Yeah. So the youngest one I had retire was 6. He had a hip injury. The oldest one was 12, and she was my first dog, and she lived to be 17 and a half.
Wow.
So, yeah. So she,
A year or 2?
no, training takes about 3 or 4 months. Yeah, yeah. And actually, we're excited. We have a principal I work with who she breeds dogs, and she has German short hair and a poodle, and she bred them, and she's giving us one of the, I shouldn't say giving, she's donating at a much reduced rate one of the puppies. And if he works out, we'll go ahead and take him. We're kind of going through we'll see. I mean, because he's only, he was born in October, so he's not very old yet. And he needs to be about 8 months old before we can really test him out. So we're pretty excited about him. And we'll see if he works out. He's the youngest one. If he works out, he'll be the youngest one.
Very smart dogs.
So, yeah. Yeah.
And do all the dogs that work with your group, do they all live with one of the handlers as a family pet in addition to a working dog?
So that's a great question. They live with us, but they're not treated like pets. And that always makes people like, oh no. But before, you worry about it, I can guarantee you they have a really good life. Where they're not pets is they're not going to have the run of the house, because when they get up on the counter or when they get into something, you can't be mad at them. So when when I'm writing in my office, they'll come in and hang out with me. And they know that they just lay down and we just hang out together. And then the other big difference is when people go to work, their pets stay home. When I go to work, the whole crew comes with me. So all 4 dogs, the 3 working dogs, I have 3 of the working dogs. Our new handler has one of our other dogs. And then Sparky, being retired, he still has to come with. He would not be happy. He's 14 years old and he would not be happy if he didn't come with. So, yeah.
We have 2 people in the Zoom audience. We're going to start with Bruce Mouse.
Sure.
What did she say?
Bruce Moses.
Here I am. I had to get the mute off. My understanding is that cadaver dogs are very different animals than drug dogs or missing person dogs or that kind of thing. They're trained differently. Is that correct?
Yes.
Good question. My understanding is, and again, this is agency to agency. So the agencies that I've personally talked to, my understanding is they still play train those dogs. Now, I've talked to different agencies and some will say, well, they either have to be a cadaver dog or search and rescue. They can't be both. And I've had agencies say, oh, no, we have our dogs trained to do both. And the reason why I say both is human scent changes from when we're alive to when we pass away. So the smell of decomp is very different than finding a live person. So, and I've heard that they're play trained. There might be some that are food trained. I mean, the ATF, their bomb dogs are actually food trained. That's their reward is food when we were talking about treats and stuff. So again, if you're researching one of those, go to the agency. I think most canine handlers are really excited to talk about their dogs. I think probably the only agency you might have a hard time getting anything out of would be the TSA, because I don't think they like people to know.
The what?
But it's
Yes.
the TSA.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I would say most cadaver and search and rescue dogs have some sort of play training, or, you know, search and rescue dogs, a lot of the reward is just finding the person for them. And that's why they don't use police dogs a lot of times for search and rescue. I won't say they never would, but they're a little bit leery because the police dogs, again, they're trained to apprehend. And they've learned when they track someone and find them, they get to bite them at the end. So if you're doing a search and rescue, it doesn't look good to have the dog latch onto someone. So, I mean, in an emergency, I think they can use the police dogs, and those handlers know how to call the dog off the bite, but it's just not ideal. So a true search and rescue dog is probably going to be a dog that they find the person, that's their reward. They might even just go and sit with the person and let their handler know they're right here and already start kind of helping that person feel better, kind of doing therapy. Cadaver dogs, I'm trying to remember, there's a really good book by Kat Warren called, I think it's What the Dog Knows. Does that sound right, Margaret? Okay. And she's a cadaver, or HRD is what canine handlers would say for human remains detection. So she's an HRD handler, and I'm thinking, I read that book, it's been a while, but I think she play trained her dog. Does that sound right? Okay.
That's what I remember.
Okay, sounds good. So, yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So our next person in line is Sabrina. And so Sabrina, could you go ahead and unmute?
Yes,
Yep.
thank you. And thank you so much for this amazing presentation. I'm really enjoying it. My question is, my question is are there conditions where a detector dog doesn't perform or can't perform as well, like humidity or heat or stress or exhaustion? I'm trying to think of the list of things that might possibly impact their ability to do their job.
Definitely, that's a great question. Wind can really throw us off. So wind can help, or wind can just really screw it up for you. So if you had winds like we had a few weeks ago, those 100-mile-an-hour winds. It's not that the dog can't find the scent, it's that it's being blown in tons of directions. So for our work, that really messes us up. I believe for tracking work, that can sometimes actually help them, but again, high winds, I would think, would interfere with that work. Humidity is a factor. When we make a drug bust, we have paperwork we fill out, and we actually fill in the humidity. And that's just, I mean, Colorado is low humidity, it's just the way it is, but it's just something that we keep track of. When we go to Oklahoma and we have that higher humidity, you can tell that scent is so much richer and so much stronger. I mean, it's like, we all know if you go to a humid area, you smell must and just everything that has more odor, right? So humidity does play a factor. So luckily, our dogs, I've always noticed when we bring them back, there's a little bit of a period where I think they have to adjust to working here, unless they came from Colorado, but a lot of our dogs come from Oklahoma. I'm trying to think of what else. Heat, certainly, heat can, again, help and hinder. Heat is, we all know that dogs have a hard time with hot weather, so you have to watch them. For us, like if we're working parking lots, I want to make sure their paws aren't getting burned or something like that. On the other hand, heat brings out scent. I mean, if we have a hot car and you had something like, wow, this is kind of gross, but like spilled milk in it, and we all know what that, yeah, everyone's like, oh, we all know what that smells like in hot weather. And so, and that's just because the heat brought that scent out stronger. So for the dogs, then it's good for them. When we have a really cold, low humidity, windy day, those are the hardest days to work. But they never cease to amaze me. They go out and do their job and they do it well. So I'm always really proud of them for that. So those are the big things I can think of. Trying to think if I'm missing anything in that. And they have their off days too. I mean, they're animals, so we get to know them and we know when they're having a good day or a bad day. And sometimes I have to go put them in the car, and I'm lucky I have 3, so I can pull another one out. I always feel for the law enforcement canine handlers who have the one dog, and maybe they have to go get a timeout. I don't know what they do when their dogs are misbehaving. So, yeah.
How many commands or words do you think the groomer would understand or does understand?
He understands a lot. He certainly knows FINDIT. He knows what that means. And if we add in DOPE, that's really exciting. The dual purpose dogs have a whole list of commands. I mean, for tracking and apprehension and evidence searches, and so they have a lot. And then the dogs read off your body language too. Like he knows right now he's kind of just chilling because he knows I'm relaxed. Yeah. So they read us. But yeah, I don't know if I've ever counted like. That's a good question.
We have Donnell Bell with another question.
Oh, awesome.
Donnell, do you want to unmute? Okay, it's not unmuted yet. You're still muted.
Okay.
There you go.
Here we go. Sorry about that. The other night we watched In the Heat of the Night with Sidney Poitier, and there was a scene where the guy's running through water, and my husband said, they won't be able to find him. I said, oh no, dogs can smell underwater because you said, can you talk about that? Did you cover that already?
No, I didn't. Thank you for asking that, because that is probably, I love, there's a Mythbusters where they went through all the stuff like water and coffee, you can hide it in this. So for water does not throw dogs off at all. Water almost can, again, you think about that humidity, that it can almost bring out the scent. Our trainer Mackie was doing a training run with a bloodhound he had, and he had the decoy, the person set in the track, go through a stream, and he had the person run upstream and then go, I don't know how far away, but Mackie said when they got to the stream, the bloodhound went and put his nose in the water and like started tracking, and he'd come up and then he'd go back down and then he'd come up, and he just kept sensing the water, and he followed the exact track. Not a problem at all. Cadaver dogs, the HRD dogs, they find bodies underwater, and that's really interesting. I was asking Mackie about that work because he's done a lot of that. And I guess what they do, again, the scent cone, yeah, that scent comes up. So they'll put the dog in a boat, and the dog will lean over the edge, and they're trained to alert. I don't know if how they alert, but they do some sort of alert. And they'll mark it with a buoy, and they'll find that scent cone. They'll kind of go back and forth, and then they know where to send divers down to look for the body. So water does not throw a dog off at all. If you want to write something that might throw a dog off, the best thing would be actually traffic. So if I had to track someone on Spear Boulevard out here and we see the amount of traffic, that's going to really mess with the scent. So if you want to lose a dog, your best bet to try, I'm not saying it's going to work, so if anyone's on the lam here, I'm not guaranteeing anything, but is to go back and forth across the street, because, and then that traffic will mess with the scent. That's probably your best bet. That being said, Mackie and another guy decided to try a new kind of tracking, and I haven't talked to him since he started this. He was hoping someone would do a breakout from their local jail so he could get a real live in the field chance to try it, but what they were doing was putting the dog, like they would get a track, go down to an intersection, the dog was trained to point in the direction, they'd put the car back, or the dog back in the car, go to the next intersection, get the dog out, the dog would point wherever, and he said it was going really well. I don't know what kind of tracking you call that, like Oklahoma and you're bored with COVID or what, but they're trying it. And so I need to ask him if they've had a jailbreak yet. If he's
That's where you need to use your German short hair pointer.
Oh, yeah.
That's true, yeah, they could just point. Yes, that's very true, Margaret, yeah. That would be perfect. I don't know what kind of dog they were. Well, now I'm gonna have to bug Mackie.
What about in the woods, like if you were being chased? I mean, what could you do? Like, what if people threw pieces of their clothing and then kept running with, would they, you know,
Oh, yeah.
act on the clothing?
Yeah.
So, and then if they were like running in circles, I mean, what could they do to confuse the dog? Clothing or running in zigzags?
You know, if you're in the woods, you should just give yourself up. That's my best advice. Oh, yeah, you may have to help me remember it, but it was a murder suspect, right? So we have a friend and our retired handler with the company who was a canine officer for Fort Collins PD. And she did a lot of in the woods tracking. That's why after her stories, I'm like, forget about it. And so they were it was a murder suspect, right?
I don't remember that part either.
Okay.
But they were tracking them.
I could be making this up, but we're all fiction writers, so. Yeah. But the gist of it was, it was a bad guy, and they were tracking it with her dog, and he went up a tree, and Eric just sit there, and her dog's name was Eric, and he just kept trying to go up the tree, right?
Well, Eric was coming after him, and the guy just was shouting from the tree, I give up, I give up.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So scared.
Yeah, that's right. Sorry, I'm not remembering this as well. Yeah. I mean, when you see, he was a black German Shepherd. So when you see that coming at you, and I think it was nighttime too, so you see the eyes coming at you. Yeah, and as far as throwing the clothing, when I talk about evidence searches, what they're training the dogs to do is, as you track a suspect, is to find evidence. So in Dee's case, they had a burglary suspect. She started tracking with her dog. He was also trained to do the evidence search. He would, he took her over to a bush. The guy had thrown a knife in there. And then he took her to another area, and the guy had thrown his gloves. And so what he'd do is the dog would alert, they would mark it as evidence and collect it, but then the dog kept tracking. Yeah. So it's pretty amazing.
And did he find the person in the end?
I think he did. Yeah, and it was funny because we were talking about trusting your dog, and it sounds like the dog took her on quite a path to the point where she was like, I wonder if he's messing with me. And I mean, he's an intact male. Maybe we're on the scent of a really cute little female dog. Like she was having a hard time trusting him, but then he would find something. But she was having a hard time trusting him because it was such an unusual. And the guy was probably trying to lose the dog. He probably knew the dog was coming after him.
It would be a fun scene to have somebody be like, strip poker, you know,
Yeah.
and then by the end, he's got nothing left. Like, I
Yeah.
got nothing left.
Yeah. Well, and I heard another story from a deputy up in Larimer County where he had a dog that they were tracking up in the mountains. Another bad guy, I don't know. Tracking the guy, and the guy ran into a lake. He saw the dog coming, just totally panicked, ran into the lake, and so what did the dog do? The dog went running in and apprehended the guy in the lake, and then took him down under the water, and then they would like come up for air, and then I mean, I wish I could have seen that. And I had to laugh because the deputy telling us this, he was a sergeant at the time, and he had a rookie with him, and he told the rookie, all right, you go in and get him. Yeah, so I mean, the dog, there's not a lot you can do to really stop them if they really have a good trail. Yeah.
All right, so let's say I have a brick of heroin.
Okay.
And I wrap it in tinfoil.
Uh-huh.
And I wrap it in plastic.
Yes.
And then I wrap plastic
Yep.
wrap in bacon. And then I.
Bacon, yeah.
And.
Boomer would love you now.
What?
Boomer would love you.
But would he alert on the bacon or would he alert on the heroin?
He would alert on the heroin. Okay, my dog would alert on the heroin and try to eat the bacon. But,
That was, he would smell the heroin.
oh yeah, yeah,
And plastic wrap and the.
definitely.
Tinfoil and, you know,
Yeah.
whatever. There's nothing I can do to hide my heroin, right?
No, and people have tried. So the way dogs smell, I use the pizza parlor analogy, is we walk into a pizza parlor and we're like, smells like pizza. They walk in and they're like, there's pepperoni, there's flour, they can actually individualize every ingredient. So when they come up to something wrapped in that, it would have to be 100% airtight, which I don't really know how you would wrap something. Nothing's ever really 100% airtight that I know of. I've yet to find anything. If you find something, let me know. I'd love to hear. We even tested out the otter boxes. That otter box, originally before they made the phone cases, they actually made like fishing gear stuff, so if it fell in water, it wouldn't get wet. Yeah, and those were supposedly like airtight. It didn't stop the dogs. So yeah, the dogs would come up and they would sniff your brick of heroin and they would say there's heroin and there's plastic wrap and there's tinfoil and oh, there's bacon. Yeah. Yes, and being lab, the first lab I worked, she was a stray. Oh man, she was bad about food. I had to watch her. She never alerted on food, but she would eat it like you would not believe. And I remember we opened up a locker once and she was an active alert. So she literally had her paw like this going on the backpack, and she was eating the kid's sandwich. Lucky for her, we found something in that locker. It was sort of like, bad dog, good dog. So, yeah, I mean, but she knew. I mean, she knew it was there. We've had, I mean, if you think about vehicles, we do a lot of vehicle checks, and we've found stuff in a vehicle, say in a jacket, in a container, in a plastic bag. I mean, that's, you're up to like 5 layers now. And it's not a problem for the dog. So, yeah. Yeah, exactly. You're right. So if you're wrapping all that, your hands get residue, you handle your vehicle's door handle, gas cap, all that. The dogs, that's something we'll do is we'll have them check those areas because that residue will stay there. And yeah.
And so if you shook hands with a drug dealer, potentially a dog would alert on your hands because some of the smell might have transferred.
I mean, they could. Now, our dogs, because we work in schools, again, we're under a little different search and seizure. Our dogs don't alert on people because the Supreme Court has ruled for schools that's considered a strip search. So we check things that are outside an arm's length, basically. If the school suspects it's on them, the school has that right to ask them to empty their pockets. But I would never ask them to do that.
Isn't that also the case with law enforcement? Wasn't there a case where it alerted on the person and the case got thrown out?
I believe you're right. I think the only time they can alert on a person is probably like an airport.
Right.
And that's under Homeland Security and all that, that special stuff. So, but yeah, it would be on you. It's gonna be on your clothing. We did a marijuana dispensary tour just to try to see. It was really nice. This dispensary offered to give us a tour and show us all the different products. It was, I was impressed. They didn't want their products to be in the hands of kids. So they felt like if we saw more and knew what we were looking for, that would be good. So anyways, I spent an hour or 2 hours in a dispensary, came home, and all the dogs looked at me like, what have you been doing? We don't know if we should snip you or be mad at you. So I had to go change clothes. So yeah, so they would smell it on you, but our dogs won't alert on it.
Wow.
Yeah, Margaret.
We have Steve Sanchez with a question.
Oh, yeah.
Do you want to unmute? Yeah, there we go.
There I go. Kathleen, this is actually from Nancy, but is there a difference between male and female neutered and spayed, and whether they train differently or whether they do their business differently at all?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think there's a huge difference. A lot of the police dogs are not neutered or spayed just because they do want to eventually use them for breeding, because you have these characteristics that you do want to pass on. We don't want to get into the breeding business, and our dogs are rescues, so they're not papered anyways, and so we go ahead and spay and neuter our dogs, but I don't think it makes a big difference. As far as the work goes, I suppose if you had an intact male and a female in heat, it could get a little distracted, but then that would be a training situation you would work through. So, yeah, good question.
You say that that he's a rescue animal, and I'm wondering, where do you rescue them from? I mean, how do you find them? I guess that's the question. How do you find them?
Yeah, when we're looking for a dog, I just start getting on rescue websites and going to rescues. It gets really hard. Yeah. Because you walk into a humane society and there's always one I'm ready to take home, and of course they're not a drug dog candidate. My husband always gets a little nervous, I think, when I start looking, but I reach out to rescues. These dogs that work well for what we do are not good pets. So they're very hard to adopt out. So a lot of the rescues, once they kind of get to know what we're looking for, sometimes they'll reach out themselves and say, hey, we have one that might make a good working dog. Are you looking?
So when you look for, how do you identify the dog? How do you say, oh, look, looks like a good candidate?
I look for the description of high energy, wants to play, needs someone to play with a lot. I look for that description. Age then too, that they're about 1 year old or 2 years old. There's a great video on, I have it saved on my phone. I don't know, maybe there's a way I could send it to the newsletter or something, if you guys are interested, or you guys can contact me via my website. I have a contact form if you're interested, but it's a conservation dog. They're starting a lot more conservation dogs to find like rare animals, poachers, that kind of stuff. And it's a rescue up in Montana. And I think it's like Rescues to the Rescue is what it's called. And they're taking in a lot of dogs, and the video is a great video on how to see if the dog has the right characteristics. And that video sums up what we would do the best. I mean, so I thought that was a pretty cool deal that they're actually trying to pull in from other rescues these dogs that need a job. Yeah, but the ones we get, I mean, everyone comments, he is really well behaved. He's been fantastic tonight. I'm so proud of him. But if you had met him when I first brought him home, there's a reason why Willow came previously and not Boomer. So it just takes a while, but he needed a job. And now that he has it and he's bonded with me, and he's calmed down a lot. So it's always hard to say that he wouldn't be a good pet, because you get to see him today, and he was kind of a good pet. But if you lived with him, you would think differently. Yeah.
If you were at a school, I'm guessing the ball would come out a dozen times maybe, or maybe he's had the ball out 3 times tonight. Is he gonna feel like this was, cheap?
No, so actually, one of the things we're playing with the training is, oh, I know, this is so sad. You want to tell them what's happening? Yeah. What we realized is part of the reason the alerts aren't as strong as we wanted is because they go alert on a backpack, and by the time someone checks it, if you were to reward them at that moment, they don't know exactly what you're rewarding them for. So we don't always reward in the field unless it's just the right scenario. So actually, he's thinking tonight's pretty fun. So, yeah. Did I see another hand? Okay, I'm just seeing things. Gotcha.
I think the audience is done. I don't have any more questions anymore.
Okay, we got one here.
Well, yours and law enforcement dogs, can they transition from, in other words, could he be loaned to a law enforcement agency for like a traffic stop or something?
They could. I mean, a good handler can take him and learn to get to know him. And in fact, that's a scenario in my book where I'm forcing my character, she's sworn off being a canine handler, and the beginning of the book forces her back into it. And she takes on a dog that belonged to another handler. But where a law enforcement agency wouldn't take him, mainly because he's trained to find gunpowder, alcohol, and marijuana. And so if they did a traffic stop and he alerted, it would invalidate the traffic stop, because a good defense lawyer would say, well, we don't know what he actually alerted on. In that case, there was a case in Colorado with that, where the dog was still trained to find marijuana, and there was also meth in the car. And so they prosecuted for the meth, and the defense attorney said, no, there was marijuana, so that invalidates the search, since the dog was still trained to find it. And they won. Yeah. So in that case, the law enforcement agency wouldn't take one of our dogs, but
and you can't untrain them.
No. Once they have that odor on them, it's there. So, yeah. And that costs a lot of agencies a lot of money. I mean, you're thinking a $40,000 dog. When that passed, those dogs, agencies were smart about it. Larimer County Sheriff said they just use those dogs for tracking and apprehension situations. If there was a traffic stop, they would call in another dog and have them run the vehicle. But it costs departments a lot of money. Now it's been legalized long enough that, new dogs aren't trained to find it, so it's not as bad, but it did. I thought some of the tax money from it should have gone to helping them replace the dogs, because, I mean, that's a lot of money statewide. Yeah. Oh, do you want to play again? He has been really good. So if anyone has any further questions, my website's just KathleenDonnelly.com, and I have a contact form on there. I am kind of working towards redoing the website, so if you get on and it's down, it'll just be a couple days. But and so yeah, feel free to reach out anytime.